Hey there. So I went on my first proper trek around 2 months ago, and it somehow ended up transforming my life. Transformation and change is nothing new for me. It literally happens all the time. Me learning new things, changing, and completely transforming my identity is pretty normal for me no matter where I am. But the transformation that this trek brought to me was something very unusual for me. Not just because what transformed, but also because how that transformation occurred. And today I'd like to share that story with you. So, my journey began in a city called Rishikesh, which is in Uttarakhand in India. When I reached there, I did not feel the best. I had gotten used to a life that felt pretty stagnant and just lacking in excitement and motivation overall. I had hoped that traveling would somehow change my state of being and make me feel something, that it would move me. But the first few days were pretty still. It was like I had solidified into a version of myself who didn't feel much. But as we started to travel towards our base camp, something started to shift. I started to feel excited to be in nature because that is something I always long for, and that always makes me feel good, no matter what my circumstances are or what's happening in my life. On the first day of our trek, I quickly realized I was not as physically prepared as I hoped I would be. As we started ascending, I found myself feeling breathless and needing to stop every few moments. The most frustrating part was that my body did not feel tired at all, and still I had to keep my pace pretty slow just to be able to breathe. This caused me to be behind the group pretty much throughout the trek whenever we were ascending. And the thing with these treks is that you need to stay with the group, probably to not get lost in an unknown, scarcely populated terrain with no network. By the way, did I mention I got lost within the first few minutes of the trek? Yup, that happened. So, what ended up happening was that I got too behind most of the group and too ahead of one person who wasn't feeling well and the sweep guide. Now, what surprised me was that I did not panic at all and instead immediately went into problem solving mode. And I was pretty lucky because I got lost in a village which had network and locals telling me which way my group went. I just remember finding my complete lack of panic so funny because my second thought after trying to find my way wasn't I hope I find my way. I just knew I would. Instead, my second thought was, wow, I'm so lucky to be able to get some alone time with such a beautiful view. Like you have to know you have brain damage when problems elicit gratitude instead of panic. Best kind of brain damage if you ask me. Anyway, I did find my way back, and even though me being behind gave me this funny and precious memory, ultimately I was still not happy with being so slow, because it also meant that people ahead would have to wait if the gap became too large. That's when a lot of shame came in. I really did not want to negatively affect anyone else's experience, but I couldn't force myself to be faster either. I just felt helpless and frustrated by my own body. And if I'm being honest, most of my shame existed not because I felt like I was spoiling anyone else's experience. It existed because I was not okay being as behind as I was. But eventually I realized that the shame wasn't helping me move ahead. So I just let it go and started to focus on my very next step and on keeping on going even if I was not where I wanted to be. Me being slow and behind was one thing, and on top of that, the weather was a whole other thing. Just a few moments after I found my way back, It started to rain and it did not stop till we got to our first campsite. Walking in rain itself didn't make it too much more difficult. What made it difficult was the high altitude and how cold the rain felt on my hands. My hands got so cold and so numb that it started to hurt very bad. And to be honest, it was my own fault. I did not carry waterproof gloves, which I will definitely keep in mind for my next trek. Before going on this trek, I had been checking the weather conditions in the area and I found myself becoming pretty attached to wanting clear blue skies. So naturally, I promised myself and the mountains that I would accept whatever roop they showed me. If you don't know, roop means appearance or form. And apparently, the mountains were like, challenge accepted. We got bad weather every single day after that. But instead of rain, thankfully, it was just teeny tiny balls of hail. Anyway, all this is to say it was physically difficult for me and I did not feel as moved as I thought I would. I am someone who's very emotionally sensitive and I find it is very easy for me to have emotionally profound experiences even when I'm just sitting in my bed at home. So it felt pretty unusual that being in nature in such an amazing Himalayan landscape didn't move me all that much. It was just light and fun and physically difficult. But something new that I experienced was just feeling deeply present. My emotional state was pretty still there. I just felt present and grateful. A huge reason I was able to feel as present as I did on that trek was because of the organization I trekked with. It's called India Hikes, and something I found deeply meaningful on that trek was the environment that was created. It was very intentional, and we were encouraged to stay in silence, to reflect about certain things, and just be mindful of each other's experience throughout the trek. I personally would have had a meaningful experience no matter what, because I'm a deeply introspective person and it doesn't matter where I am. I find meaning any which way. But the environment that was created, it was so potent and in a way transformative because I got to experience that sense of meaning in a group. And I think that is something very unique and rare that I haven't found very often in a group setting. I just appreciated and valued that very deeply. India Hikes has this motto which goes like, treks that transform lives. And I didn't think much of that when I was on the trek because I knew transformation is nothing new for me. So I was like, of course I'll transform, especially in nature because every meaningful experience transforms me. But what I did not expect at all was what happened once I got back home. I have struggled with procrastination my entire life. But I just felt so driven and motivated after my trek that it really felt like a match was lit under me and I just had to create. I thought it was the mountains that transformed me. But now that some time has passed, I realize that what really transformed me was the mountains that I had been climbing within myself this entire time. Feeling behind in life, getting lost in life, feeling slow. Those were not new experiences for me. So when I encountered them physically instead of mentally, I knew how to move through them and be okay. And in turn, what the mountain gifted me with was momentum. But now I see that it was just a key that unlocked effortless action for me. It was not something that sustained this effortless action. The reason this is important is because even when some doors open for you, it can be very difficult to move move through them and have that movement be sustainable. What sustained me was all the inner work I had been doing all along to remove friction from me taking action in life. From the outside, procrastination can look like laziness or overthinking. But in reality, procrastination exists because the emotional and mental weight of taking a certain action is very heavy. And the mountains I had been climbing within myself were me moving through this emotional and mental weight. And I want to share a bit about what exactly it was that created this internal friction, because I think it can apply to a lot of people. So the first big thing was my fear of being seen. Not just as myself, because I'm pretty stable in who I am as a person. I am afraid of being seen trying and potentially failing, and also of being seen inaccurately. I have felt misunderstood pretty much my entire life, and I still do. That is just a truth of my life at this point. People who do not self-reflect often cannot perceive a huge part of me, and that's okay, I don't need them to. But I realized what this fear of being seen causes is perfectionism, and not the kind I like that I mentioned in my last video. There is a part of perfectionism I really enjoy. I really enjoy paying attention to details and just making things fit in a nice, organized way. But what I do not enjoy is carrying this feeling of needing my expression to be a certain way so that I would be perceived a certain way. That just feels inauthentic and makes my expression feel suffocated. Another thing that deeply affects my ability to effortlessly take action is something I feel most of the world suffers with, at least at this point. It is feeling guilty resting. It is feeling that I need to be constantly on and doing something to feel productive and feel like I'm making progress. But what I realized when I was actually moving effortlessly was that creativity doesn't happen without rest, without going inward. And these things from the outside can look like doing nothing. So a huge part of me taking action effortlessly is becoming okay with just taking time to go inward and do nothing basically, because I find that my ideas come when my brain is empty, not when it is occupied. And because of this inability, this shame to feel like I need to be doing all the time, there exists a lot of guilt and this feeling of needing to justify taking a creative and unconventional path in life. And by creative, I don't just mean making art and making content. By creative, I mean a path that I am creating as I go. A path where no one is telling me what to do and I'm just figuring it out. So many of us feel so much shame when we do not want to follow convention, and we feel like we need to justify to everyone around us why we are choosing an unconventional path, why we deserve it, how we are actually planning to do it, and what steps we are taking to do it and ensure that we do not fail. That really does not facilitate effortless action. It just causes anxiety. The number one thing an unconventional path requires is this creativity and the ability to be flexible and, just recognize patterns and constantly be aware of what is working and what is not, and being curious. The biggest thing I have found that keeps me stuck in inaction is having an unstable identity. Creativity requires decisive action. If I'm not sure of who I am, if I'm not sure of am I allowed to do this, if I'm not sure of is this really okay for me to do, if I'm not sure of is me showing up in a messy way really okay, then that causes a lot of mental friction that fuels procrastination. It's like you need to become this person who is stable and standing in this identity of what you are already capable of doing. But without the identity, and not only in absence of external validation but also in presence of external and internal doubt, you really need the identity to keep you going. Without it, there is just a lot of friction, which is unnecessary a lot of times. So, investing in your healing, really building up your identity, and just becoming stable and grounded as a person, that holds so much more value than just forcing yourself and urgently needing to produce output. The last big thing I find that keeps me stuck in inaction is just not feeling emotionally regulated. When I don't feel emotionally regulated, I just go to social media and consume, play games, distract myself. You could be doing other things to distract yourself as well. It doesn't just have to be social media. You could be doing things that feel productive to a part of you, that could serve as a distraction from what you feel like you really need to do. And I'm not saying any of this to shame myself or you for that matter. I am pointing this out to encourage emotional regulation, because at times this uncertainty and frustration of things not going the way I expect, that can be really overwhelming. So finding tools to regulate yourself emotionally is really important. Do whatever works for you. Go on a walk, make art, listen to calming music, meditate, exercise, whatever works. Just pay very close attention to helping yourself feel good and stable. Because in an unconventional path, you really need to feel stable internally to deal with uncertainty. And it's not always going to be easy. But to learn to not shame yourself and to keep going back to regulating yourself emotionally, that is really, really, really important. I have stopped shaming myself at this point when I reach for social media or just distract myself. For the first time, I have stopped it. Because if I shame myself, it just makes me want to distract myself even harder. It's very counterintuitive. None of this is strictly required, by the way. You can just work with shame, with forcing yourself, with feeling urgency. It will not stop you from successfully building in an unconventional path. It will just cause a lot of internal turmoil, and if it is effortless action that you are looking for, like me, you need to excavate all the internal friction first. The only two options I see is become so strong to fight for your path every single day, or just dig so deep within yourself that you remove everything that stands in your way from the root. Immense willpower or immense inner work are the two options for an unconventional path. And I just find that the second one works better for me. It brings me a lot of clarity and stability while I walk down this path. You can choose either one, and both of them are equally valid. And regardless of which one you choose, I just want to tell you, I respect you so much if you are someone who has chosen an unconventional path, because that means you are part of the people who are building a new world, new ways of being, which we so desperately need at this point in time, because the old way hasn't been working. It is not sustainable and it is not healthy. So thank you for doing this work. The last thing I will leave you with is a shameless plug. I have been posting art tutorials on Instagram specifically to target certain feelings and to transform your emotional state internally. So that is one emotional regulation tool from my side for you that you can check out if you think that is something that would help you. The link will be in the description. And that is all I have to share for today. Thank you so much for coming on this art trip with me. Hopefully, I'll see you in the next one. Till then, take care.